my name is Robert Holland from SAPinsider, and I'm here today talking with Lee Johnson, Director of Sales Engineering for the East region for Virtustream. Lee, welcome to the conversation.
Robert, thank you for having me and Virtustream today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start with a straightforward question. Who is Virtustream and what solutions are you providing today that directly impact SAP customers?
Well, thank you for asking. Virtustream is a Dell Technologies business and the enterprise cloud and service provider for trusted enterprises, right? We migrate and run mission critical SAP applications in the cloud, and there are several clouds: the Virtustream Enterprise Cloud, the Azure, and Google Cloud.
What are the business challenges that you sort of see? What are they? And it sounds like you've very much got that transformation topic. You've got making sure that systems are available, disaster recovery is working. But when enterprises are exploring the cloud, when they're exploring Virtustream solutions, what are the top of mind business challenges that they're looking to resolve? Is it primarily transformation, maybe a lift and shift, maybe a move, and solving disaster recovery, or are there others as well?
There are. Well, you just opened up the box on that one. Every single enterprise that you have a conversation with, they have different priorities, right? And some of them, they want to do a big bang move. They want to be into a total cloud experience, right? So that's some of the customers where we're talking about. But of course, those customers, there are different customers. Some want to basically do a POC for S4 to understand how it's going to work. They want to basically test some different scenarios. And what Virtustream can do for those customers is we can spin that environment up, and have it for a short-term duration, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? So that's to help customers to understand, well, how are they going to run that S4 environment? But I would say the majority of our customers, right, they are looking for that cloud experience so that they can help to reduce some of their costs, right? But they're also, so that's what they're doing. There's always going to be a cost component for everything that you do with a business, and being able to move over into a cloud operating model is one of those huge business drivers that are there. But I actually think that when you are only looking at the cost component, you kind of miss the forest for the trees, right? Because really what I believe that our customers are really trying to explore is, well, what type of insights can I actually gain outside of this data, right? And that's when you actually have to be on some type of cloud service that might have access to GPUs. You might need access to an HPC, or you might need access to a data lake, or other types of services that are going to be available so that you can have access to that data. And at the end of the day, right, you're looking to enhance your customer's experience in whatever case that might be. So when you can actually couple the data that you have internal to your SAP solution with some of that data that you can harvest from like other third parties, right, you can really build that customer insight, and then that results in an increased customer experience when they're interacting with your organization, right? So once you get to the cloud, you have built that foundation upon which you can do a digital transformation. And as I mentioned, that to me starts with infrastructure modernization to give you that high availability with low lead times. So that way, whenever you have an idea, you can immediately act upon that idea. You're not waiting for infrastructure to become available in order to be able to transact. I think that that's one of the huge benefits. But of course, you always have to have a bottom line conversation around ROI and TCO to make sure that you're hitting the numbers for the business objective. And it's always been the case, at least in my experience, that most enterprises from an IT perspective, right, their budget is some percentage in the single digits usually of the overall revenues, right? So the CIO and the CTO, they're always under constraints to do more with less, right? Because they have that technology debt that's there with the on-premises environment, et cetera, monolithic applications. So for me, it starts with infrastructure modernization, then application modernization. And for those applications that can't be modernized, then you have to talk about refactoring those applications. And the cloud is actually where you can do that. You can transition from a monolithic application into a cloud native type of application where you can leverage a number of different services, right? But still, when it comes to enterprises, how fast can an enterprise move, right? So I think you have to have the conversation in two different spaces. You have your systems of engagement, right? Those are the ones where you can probably have a CI/CD type of model where you're constantly pushing changes into production. But then you also have to have, a system of record, right? And that's where your business is. Those processes aren't really that adaptable on such quick notice because you have people who are doing the job, and when the job changes or the screen changes, they're like, well, what happened? Right. So you have to have a perspective on both sides of it. I think you have to have that what am I doing now type of view, right? I think it's called bimodal in the Gartner space, right? You're talking about what it is that you're doing today, but you're also trying to future-proof whatever it is that you do so that it doesn't put you in a box and constrain you.
One of the things that you've sort of talked about, Lee, is, we've talked a little bit about transformation. We've talked about, moving into the cloud. But one of the things I think that organizations have to kind of really do if they want to truly see the benefits of those is look beyond transformation to modernization.
Yes.
Right. So it's not just moving the systems in a lift and shift. It's actually doing something more than just that. And, I think you've talked about enjoying, greenfield opportunities, because I think it gives that opportunity to sort of come in and look at all the processes that people are running and potentially modernize them. So, in your experience, what does modernization look like for enterprises that are looking to transform with SAP S/4HANA?
Well, there's a gentleman who I follow named Rob Llewellyn, and I actually took his course on business digital transformation, right? And one of the things that Rob actually evangelizes on is that you can have an incremental change, right? That's when you're going to bring about change that basically puts you into a better space and it buys you a little bit of time, right? But one of the things that he emphasizes is that you almost have to have a transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly, right? That's the type of transformation that you need to have in this day and age where you don't compete on a domestic market, but you compete in an international market, right? And one of the things that I like to have a conversation about is I found a chart on the longevity of many companies today, right? And the longevity of many companies right now is averaging between 12 and 15 years, right? Whereby in the early 1900s, you had companies or enterprises that existed for 40, 50, and 60 years, right? So I believe that for an organization to survive in this global market, change has to be something that's built into their culture, right? They should never move into day two. They should always stay in day one, right? So that's the concept that I have when it comes to digital transformation. And we have to say, well, how is it that can I take a step back? And the conversation that I like to have with my customer is really about a couple of different things, right? It's called the 3 wise men. And, as a sales engineer, I'm a big fan of John Kerr. And the 3 wise men basically have, how do I increase revenue? How do I reduce cost? Or how do I reduce risk, right? And with any conversation or dialogue that I'm having with a customer, those are the 3 things that are always in my mind. So I'm looking at transformation from that experience, right? How can I help them to increase revenue, right? And by moving that SAP application into a cloud type model where I have access to APIs, right? That I could expose that data into some type of web service or microservice is an opportunity that that customer has that can increase their revenue because they are operating wherever their customers are, whether their customers are going to be on mobile or a desktop, etc., they have access to that company's data, and it also has to be secure, right? But when you also talk about transformation, one of the bits and pieces of transformation, of course, we talked about is cost, but I also like to think about risk, right? Because there's a risk when you're running on premises. Do you have the security architects who have eyes on glass 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're looking for those bad actors to understand if there's any type of data filtration going on inside of your network? So there's many different things that happen when you're doing a digital transformation, but I say the reason why you really want to do digital transformation, and again, it's the butterfly, the caterpillar transforming into the butterfly, that you want to be able to take these services with transformation and be able to enhance and increase your customers' experience. That's the genesis of why you have to have digital transformation, because for some odd reason, most CIOs and CTOs should be up at night worrying how is some other company coming up with another innovative solution that actually takes share from them.
Now, one of the things I know that Virtustream does is you offer multi-cloud solutions. More and more of the customers that I see, responding to SAPinsider research are doing, hybrid environments where they have, potentially some things running on premise, some things running in the private cloud, some things running in the public cloud, depending on, or combinations thereof. When you're talking to somebody about, multi-cloud solutions, where does the conversation begin for you when you're particularly around SAP products?
Well, for me, it's always going to be around, well, let's understand the requirements for that workload and what type of availability and reliability requirements are there, right? And in our space, I remember a long time ago, I learned that, functional people deal with functional requirements, right? Technical people deal with non-functional requirements. So that's always going to be where the conversation is starting for me, right? Well, how much downtime can you tolerate? What are your RTOs and your RPOs? When I learned architecture, we called it the ILITs, right? Operability, maintainability, availability, reliability, et cetera. And there's about, 12 of those that you have to architect for, right? So that's where the conversation is going to start with me is, let's understand what your requirements are, because as you mentioned, Robert, we have a number of different solutions that we can offer our customer depending upon where that workload needs to reside. And today, there's going to be multi-cloud, and multi-cloud can be a number of different flavors, right? We understand, well, what is their SaaS presence? What applications are they working with that, are only accessible through an API or a browser? But we also want to understand, well, what are the data lifecycle requirements, right? And that data lifecycle is something that is very imperative to our legacy customers, because at that point in time, it didn't really cost you anything if you had a database that was multi-terabytes, right? One of the things with our experience is that we can understand well with our customer, and as they're making a transition over to an in-memory database, that having that data resident inside of that primary database is going to be not cost effective, right? So one of the conversations that I have with my customers as they're making a journey from a traditional RDBMS over to HANA in memory is, well, let's understand your data, understand the life cycle, what's hot, what's warm, what's cold, and let's put together a strategy so that we don't have to have that conversation with you about going up to the next highest tier when it comes to your HANA memory requirements. So that's one of the things that is very critical with our customers, either whether or not if they're greenfield or brownfield, but as they're making that transition over to in-memory, that's one of the cost considerations that if they take as a top priority, they will save significant resources, because when you think about database size, right, you have to worry about the in-memory component, but you also have to worry about the backup resources, et cetera, and then disaster recovery, right? This thing has a cascading effect on your infrastructure if you don't take account of it early on, right? And that's one of the things that Virtustream brings to the table, is that experience of knowing when and where and how we can help our customer to save money.
So there might be as many as 40,000 enterprise ERP customers that SAP have that are yet to deploy SAP S/4HANA. Some of them might have licenses, but some of them are still trying to make up their mind about what they're going to do next. What's a piece of advice that you would have for enterprises that are undergoing a transformation to SAP S/4HANA, who are thinking about it, or who perhaps are still a little on the fence about what they're going to do?
Well, it all starts for me with, what is the business problem that you're trying to resolve, right? You have to understand whether or not if it's going to be consolidation of several different systems so that you can reduce your operating costs with licenses and things of that sort. But what is the business result that you're looking to achieve? Please help me to define, well, what does success look like for you, right? That's how you have to go into this. It's not, cost is a baseline, right? It's table stakes at this point in time. Everybody knows that IT is always under pressure to reduce their costs, right? But I want to know, well, how is it? Because you got the conversation about cost is really on the speeds and feeds level, right? Because I'm replacing infrastructure with infrastructure and I'm looking to save some cost, right? But when you're making a transition over from traditional R3 or ECC over to S4, well, what is going to be the value that the business is going to achieve? And I actually believe that this is the opportunity for IT practitioners to have the seat at the big boy table, because now they're talking about strategy and strategic things that they can do once they have that data in the cloud, right? How can we, go back to the three wise men, right? And in this day and age, the three wise women, right? And let's have that conversation about how how is IT helping to increase revenue, right? How is IT looking to increase the customer's experience when they interact with this brand, right? Those are the conversations that IT can now be in the forefront. They can be the thought leaders who are saying, well, this is what we can do, right? And we have these plateaus that we need to achieve in order to be able to get there, right? So plateau 1 is this, plateau 2 is this, and this is going to be the end state. And these are the programs, or rather, these are the projects that we have to put in place for this program in order to get to that destination. So I might be sounding like a TOGIF advertisement here, and I wouldn't say my apologies, because it has taught me a lot when I went through that certification. But you have your as is, right? You know what it is that you have, right? You have to do some type of rationalization, whether that's going to be infrastructure or application rationalization, but you always have to think about your future state, right? Because too often architectures aren't future-proofed, and it gets you into an area where you would have to go into reverse, right, before you can go forward in order to achieve your goals and objectives.
Yeah, I really like that topic about defining what does success look like for you. Because I think you're right. If you're really going to be successful to move to SAP S/4HANA, you have to understand where you're starting from and where you want to get, and what that looks like, how you're going to define the success of that move, right?
Mhm.
Is it streamlined processes? Is it, you're able to get everyone online during, as one of the things you talked about right at the beginning, period close, right?
Yes.
Because that's when the system is under the most stress. Can you get your reports done in the same, in the same rapid speed at that time of the month as you can at any other time in the financial period? How are you going to, define, is it more uptime? Is it, better availability generally? What are the things that you need to define success? And I think that's a great starting point for people who are moving to the cloud, or just moving to SAP S/4HANA in general, whether they implement a multi-cloud solution or not.
Well, I think most customers are going to have a multi-cloud solution, whether that is working with a SaaS, right? Or working with different IaaS providers, there's also going to be data that can't go into any cloud and has to reside in the private cloud, right? So, there's a flavor for just about everyone, but it all comes back to what are your requirements going to be there. But unlocking that data is key, because companies really have a 12 to 15-year window before someone's looking to take their lunch. And this is a conversation that they need to have early on, but they need to have, you have to have like a CI/CD mindset, or a PDCA, plan, do, check, act. And that has to be iterative, and it has to always be moving, because I would say the one constant in business today is the fact that change is a part of your everyday cycle. You don't have time to rest and relax, because of course we're competing in a global type of environment, and there's someone who's looking to take your lunch for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your time, Lee. It's been great speaking with you today.
Robert, I really enjoyed the conversation and hope that you'll have us back again, myself and Virtustream.
Absolutely.